The Premier League isn't exactly renowned for its academy output. The league's vast wealth has long prompted criticism that clubs would rather sign established players from overseas than give their own youngsters a chance. Hence why the Elite Player Performance Plan was introduced in 2011, implementing homegrown player quotas, a hierarchy of academies, and new coaching provisions. Since then, there have been some real gems who have come through Premier League academies, though the Premier League does still have by far the highest percentage of foreign players of any European league at just under 66%, or 2/3. Recently, I made a video taking a look at 7 football clubs with fairly unremarkable senior teams but absolutely outstanding academies. In that video, I stated that the biggest, richest, and best football clubs tend to have the best academies, and that there are only a small number of exceptions. In the comments, someone suggested that I put that theory to the test, in England at least, by attempting to rank every Premier League academy from worst to best. So, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not actually going to be ranking them based on their facilities, coaching, and scouting networks, because despite some very polite emails, not all of them got back to me about my request to actually visit their training grounds, interview their staff, and assess their procedures for the purposes of ranking them for a video on YouTube. I know, unbelievable. The sheer audacity of these clubs to think that they are better than a YouTube channel that just hit 500,000 subscribers. Thanks for that, by the way. I celebrated by doing 15 shots of Baby Guinness, but I will also be doing a Q&A at some stage. Instead, I'm just going to rank the academies, not exclusively, but primarily, on their output in recent years. Since, in theory at least, that should be testament to their youth recruitment, facilities, coaching, and all the rest of it. Without further ado then, who obviously came through the IMG Academy, here is how I would rank every Premier League academy from worst to best. 20th, Brentford. This is a bit of a rubbish start, since Brentford only reopened their academy literally 2 months ago in order to comply with Premier League rules. I have seen a fair amount of confusion about Brentford's academy status, but effectively, the Bees closed their academy back in 2016, which was costing them around £2 million a year to run, because they felt that they weren't getting value for money, and they replaced it with a B team. It is not true to say that Brentford neglected youth team football, as some have suggested. They just decided to focus all of their attention on developing players between the ages of 17 and 20, for example, rather than trying to nurture the best young kids from the age of 6 or 7 onwards. The logic from Brentford was that, located in West London, with the formidable academies of Chelsea, Fulham, and even Queen's Park Rangers for competition, they were unlikely to attract the very best prospects while still in their early teens or younger. By focusing their resources instead on players in their late teens, typically either from overseas or those who had been released by the big London academies, they could save money for a start, whilst also developing more players capable of stepping up to the first team. Premier League rules introduced this season dictated that Brentford had to have an academy, though they have refounded a Category 4 academy, which functions on a similar model to their existing B team anyway, focusing on players who are already or are on the verge of turning professional. It is notable that Brentford's 2 best recent youth team graduates, Chris Mepham and Marcus Force, both joined the club in that 15 to 18 age bracket, Mepham from Chelsea and Force from West Brom. So despite being experts at signing extremely talented young players, Brentford have to get us started with probably the longest segment in this entire video. 19th, Bournemouth. Aside from the slight quirk and technicality of Brentford, there are no terrible Premier League academies, and even 19th place Bournemouth have 3 very promising youngsters in their first team squad, all of whom only recently graduated from their youth ranks. They are goalkeeper Mark Travers, who played 46 times for the club last season and has even won 3 caps for the Republic of Ireland, winger Jadon Anthony, who was a starman for the Cherries in the Championship last season, and Lambeth-born Zimbabwe international Jordan Zamora. All 3 are real talents, as is Nottingham Forest striker Sam Surridge, who came through the Cherries Academy, and Danny Ings, who did likewise 5 or 6 years before that. For a club of Bournemouth's size, whose rise over the past 10 to 15 years has been absolutely meteoric, that isn't bad at all. But it is still only enough to earn them a spot in 19th. 18th, Newcastle United. Newcastle, and the North East, has historically been a hotbed of talent in English football, with the likes of Jack and Bobby Charlton, Paul Gascoigne, Alan Shearer, and Brian Robson all heralding from that part of the country, among many others. For that reason, before researching this video, I'd have expected Newcastle to feature in my top 10. Yet, here they are, in the academy relegation zone. The only two active England internationals from the North East, Jordan Henderson and Jordan Pickford, both came through the youth ranks at Sunderland, and Newcastle's production line in recent years has been really underwhelming for a club of their size, tradition, and large catchment area. No doubt partly due to underfunding from Mike Ashley, and it is no surprise that the club's new owners have promised to overhaul and heavily invest in a new academy. There have still been some gems from St James's in recent years: Adam Armstrong at Southampton, James Tavernier at Rangers, and Sean Longstaff, still at Newcastle, perhaps being the most notable, but that is only enough to earn them a spot in 18th. 17th, Wolverhampton Wanderers. An academy with some pedigree, it isn't all that long since the likes of Robbie Keane and Jolyon Lescott came through the youth ranks at Wolverhampton Wanderers. The most notable alumni of the Wolves Academy in more recent years is undoubtedly Morgan Gibbs-White, who left Molineux in a move to Nottingham Forest worth an initial £25 million and a potential £42.5 million this season. The likes of Ryan Giles at Middlesbrough, Dion Sanderson at Birmingham City, and Jack Price, who plays for Colorado Rapids in the MLS, are just about enough to earn Wolves a spot in 17th, only narrowly above our academy relegation zone. 16th, Nottingham Forest. Big spending Nottingham Forest have a handful of homegrown players within their current first-team squad, despite their very well-documented summer investment, and historically their academy has nurtured some outstanding players. There was Viv Anderson and John Robertson during the 1970s, Des Walker and Scott Gemmell in the 80s, and the likes of Michael Dawson, Jermaine Genus and David Prutton during the 90s. The current Forest squad boasts former academy graduates Joe Worrell, Ryan Yates, and starman Brennan Johnson. Meanwhile, the Trees can also name Newcastle United centre-back Jamal Lascelles, Leeds United striker Patrick Bamford, and Aston Villa fullback Matty Cash among their academy graduates from the last decade alone. It's not bad going, even if it isn't quite vintage Forest youth production, and it is enough to comfortably keep them out of our bottom three. 15th, Brighton and Hove Albion. This seems brutal because Brighton have played a part in the development of some terrific young players in recent years, but it is just a mark of the strength of a number of Premier League academies, and more to the point, just how little there is to split a number of them. English football's top-flight record appearance holder during the Premier League era, Gareth Barry, spent 6 years in the Brighton youth ranks before joining Aston Villa as a trainee. Meanwhile, more recently, Ben White graduated from the Brighton Academy before being sold to Arsenal for £50 million. Both Brighton under-23s and under-18s compete in their respective top flights for their age groups, and the fact that 3 Brighton Academy graduates, Robert Sanchez, Lewis Dunk, and Solly March, are all regulars in the club's current first team, suggests that Brighton are certainly doing something right in regards to youth team football. 14th, Leeds United. When Leeds United were in the doldrums, dropping out of the Premier League, and even down into League One, it was often their academy that kept the club going. The likes of Alan Smith, James Milner, and later Aaron Lennon and Danny Rose helped to raise vital funds following relegation, before the likes of Fabian Delph, Johnny Howson, Sam Byram, Lewis Cook, Alex Mowat, Ronaldo Vieira, Charlie Taylor, and many others made either a big impression in the first team, were sold on for significant fees, or both. More recently, Calvin Phillips became a star man at Ellen Road under Marcelo Bielsa, before being sold to Manchester City for £42 million. things have dried up a little bit since Phillips graduated at Ellen Road 8 years ago, partly because Leeds have just got much better, making it more difficult for young players to break into the first team, but the academy of Charles, Lorimer and Bremner is still good value for a spot in 14th. 13th, Everton. Everton are another team who I probably would have expected to feature in my top 10 before doing any research, given their impressive heritage when it comes to academy football. In relatively recent times, Wayne Rooney is of course the Toffee's most famous gift to the world of football. Rooney was one of the greatest teenage footballers that the Premier League has ever seen, but since then, there haven't been too many genuine superstars that have come out of Finch Farm. Jack Rodwell looked to be a real prospect before his career stagnated at Man City and then was executed at Sunderland. Ross Barkley showed glimpses of brilliance and even earned comparisons with Rooney at times, but is now playing for Nice at the age of 28. And Tom Davies, who is still at Everton, tailed off a bit following his breakthrough, but is now back in the mix and playing games under Frank Lampard. The most prominent current Everton Academy graduate is of course Anthony Gordon, who Everton rejected a £45 million bid for from Chelsea over the summer, but that isn't quite enough to take the Toffees any higher than 13th. 12th, Fulham. Given that Fulham have effectively been a yo-yo club in recent years, despite significant investment, their academy output is seriously impressive. In fact, before Ethan Nwaneri made his Arsenal debut, just before the international break at the age of only 15, the two youngest players of the Premier League era were both Fulham players, namely Harvey Elliott and Matthew Briggs. Both Elliott and fellow Cottagers prodigy Fabio Carvalho now play for Liverpool. Meanwhile, Ryan Sessegnon left Fulham in a £25 million move to Tottenham Hotspur. Currently on forward, Moussa Dembele left Fulham to join Celtic, and Marek Rodak made 35 appearances as Fulham won the championship title last season. Pretty impressive stuff. 11th, Leicester City. Given the facilities at Leicester City now, whilst the first team might not be inspiring Foxes fans with all that much confidence at this moment in time, their academy probably should. Somewhat under the radar, Leicester have a really solid academy output, and their academy has had Category 1 status since 2013. Ben Chilwell, who Leicester sold to Chelsea for £45 million a couple of years ago, is probably the biggest name in recent years, but then you've got the likes of Luke Thomas, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall and Harvey Barnes, all of whom are in the current Leicester City first team. Add in Daniel Everson, Jeffrey Schlupp and Hamza Chowdhury, and I think that the Foxes are good value for a spot just outside of our top 10. 10th, West Ham United. Few teams in English football could name an all-time Academy Alumni 11 as impressive as West Ham. The self-styled Academy of Football has bestowed the likes of Bobby Moore, Martin Peters, Jeff Hurst, Rio Ferdinand, Michael Carrick, Frank Lampard, and Joe Cole upon the world of football, so 10th might seem somewhat underwhelming. Still, even today, West Ham's star man, Declan Rice, is a product of their own youth ranks, having been picked up by the Hammers after he was released by Chelsea, as is right-back Ben Johnson, Augsburg's Reece Oxford, and West Brom star Grady Diangana. It is not quite enough to be able to call West Ham World Cup winners, as they did in '66, but it still ain't half bad. West Ham's under-23s finished second in the Premier League 2 last season, behind only Manchester City, though they are currently bottom of the league, just 6 games into their current campaign. 9th, Crystal Palace. Probably the most underrated academy in the Premier League, given how competitive scouting networks are in London, and the fact that Crystal Palace are, with all due respect of course, neither the biggest nor the richest of London clubs. Their output is absolutely superb and has been for a number of years. Although the Palace Academy only gained Category 1 status in 2020, the likes of Kenny Sansom, Gareth Southgate, Victor Moses, Nathaniel Klein and Wilfred Zaha all came through the Eagles' youth ranks long before that. More recently, Aaron Wan-Bissaka was sold to Manchester United for between £40 to £45 million, and Tarek Mitchell is the club's first-choice left-back. 8th, Tottenham Hotspur. The first of the current Big Six to feature, which suggests that the best academies are fairly concentrated among the biggest and richest clubs, the Tottenham Academy is a bit of a mixed bag. The likes of Nick Barmby, Ledley King, Glenn Hoddle, Graham Souness and Sol Campbell ensure that there can be no doubts about the Spurs Academy's historic standing, and of course, Tottenham's main man, who is destined to go down as one of England's all-time greats, Harry Kane, is the most notable recent example. After Kane, in recent years, there are lots of decent players like Kyle Walker-Peters, Oliver Skipp, Japhet Tanganga and Harry Winks, but no real other genuine superstars. Troy Parrott may be one to keep an eye on though, currently on loan at Preston, aged 20, and already capped 17 times by the Republic of Ireland. 7th, Southampton. The only English club that featured in the recent video that I mentioned during the introduction. For a number of years, Southampton outperformed even the biggest Premier League teams when it came to academy graduates. Forgetting the likes of Dennis Wise, Matt Le Tissier and Alan Shearer, in the space of just a few years during the mid-2000s, the likes of Theo Walcott, Gareth Bale and Adam Lallana all graduated from the Saints youth ranks. Since then, there has been Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Matt Targett, Callum Chambers and Luke Shaw, in addition to Southampton's captain and star player, James Ward-Prowse. Add in all of the outstanding young talent that is currently at the club or out on loan, and even with a bit of a drop-off over the last few years, Southampton deservedly still takes 7th. 6th, Aston Villa. By every metric possible, Aston Villa have one of the best academies in English football, whether that be their facilities, their scouting networks, their historic output, the current strength of their youth teams, or most importantly of all, their recent graduates. Since the likes of Gareth Barry, Gary Cahill, and Gabiag Bonlahor graduated from the youth ranks at Villa Park, Jack Grealish has become Villa captain, and then been sold for a British record £100 million fee, Jacob Ramsey has established himself as an outstanding prospect in the Villa first team, and even Carney Chukwuemeka, following just 15 first-team appearances and a rumoured wage dispute, was sold over the summer for around £20 million to Chelsea. Add in Cameron Archer, among others, who has scored 4 goals in 9 games for Villa to date, and bagged 7 in 20 on loan at Preston last season, and the club from Birmingham deservedly mix it with the big boys in this list. 5th, Liverpool. If you were to draw up an all-time Liverpool Academy Graduate 11, featuring the likes of Billy Liddell, Steven Gerrard, Michael Owen, Robbie Fowler, Jamie Carragher, Ian Callaghan, Phil Thompson and Steve McManaman, you could assemble quite the side, even without any of the current crop. It is more recent graduates that are the subject of these rankings though, where Liverpool's star men are undoubtedly Trent Alexander-Arnold and Raheem Sterling, 2 of the best players in English football since their respective breakthroughs. Add in Connor Cody, Harry Wilson, Curtis Jones, Nico Williams, and even someone like Ryan Brewster, a regular for England under-21s, who the Reds were able to sell for more than £20 million, and whilst Liverpool's academy might not have been at its absolute peak over the past decade, it is still very much among the most esteemed in English football. 4th, Arsenal. You could reel off a similar list of all-timers when it comes to the Arsenal Academy, thanks to the likes of Ashley Cole, Cesc Fabregas, and Tony Adams, as we just did with Liverpool, and in the here and now, I don't think that there can be too many doubts that the Gunners Academy is even more productive than Liverpool's. Bukayo Saka is one of both Arsenal and England star players. Emile Smith-Rowe, whilst currently out injured, was exceptional at times last season, and Eddie Nketiah hit double figures from limited minutes in all competitions last season. Away from the Emirates, you have got Aston Villa and Argentina number 1, Emiliano Martinez, Barcelona fullback Hector Bellerin, Everton's Alex Iwobi, Joe Willock at Newcastle, Wojciech Szczesny at Juventus, and most notably of all, Serge Gnabry at Bayern Munich. Looking at that, it is a wonder that Arsenal only come 4th, but I'm sure I have my reasons. I hope so anyway. 3rd, Manchester United. I actually think that Manchester United have done a spectacularly bad job in recent years of getting the best out of their academy graduates once they step up to the first team, which I might make an entire video about at some point, but that is not the fault, I don't think, of their youth team system itself. Historically, over the past 30 years, Manchester United have had by far the best academy in all of English football. It is now exactly 30 years since the famed class of '92 came through, a miraculous group of young players which included the likes of Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, David Beckham, Gary Neville, Phil Neville, and Nicky Butt. Even if the Red Devils haven't got the best out of them though, the last decade has still seen the likes of Paul Pogba, Marcus Rashford, Dean Henderson, Jesse Lingard, Scott McTominay, and Anthony Elanga step up to the first team, among many others of course. There aren't many Premier League teams who can rival that, and the current United youth ranks are packed full of quality yet again. Second, Manchester City. Manchester City's academy facilities are quite possibly the best in all of world football, let alone just the Premier League, and the precision and reach of their scouting networks now threaten to leave the rest of the Premier League's academies in the dust. Even before the arrival of Emirati cash, Man City already had an impressive academy output, with the likes of Sean Wright-Phillips, Joey Barton, Mika Richards and Stephen Ireland all having established themselves in the club's first team. In recent times though, Phil Foden has become one of the best young players on the planet, as did Jadon Sancho at Borussia Dortmund after leaving the Citizens. Kelechi Iheanacho scored 21 goals in 64 games at the Etihad before being sold for £25 million, and the performances of 18-year-old Romeo Lavea this season, who just joined Southampton from Man City, have been nothing short of outstanding. Throw in Cole Palmer, and those in even younger age groups, and the Citizens' superb results at academy level in recent years, and they are unfortunate not to take top spot. First, Chelsea. There aren't many clubs in all of world football whose academies can rival the output of Chelsea's youth ranks over recent years. The sheer number and the consistency of Cobham's conveyor belt of talent is without peer in all of English football. In the Chelsea first team right now, you have got Mason Mount, Reece James, Conor Gallagher, Armando Broja, Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Trevor Chalobah. Elsewhere, there is Fikayo Tomori, Tammy Abraham, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Mark Gué, Andreas Christensen, Nathan Ake, Tariq Lamptey, Tino Livramento, Bertrand Traore, Dominic Solanke, Jeremy Boga, Levi Colville, Billy Gilmore, and I have little doubt that I'm missing some there as well. Throw in Declan Rice, who the Blues were foolish enough to release, and you have probably got a squad right there capable of challenging for the top 6 in the Premier League with no external help whatsoever. Historically, during the early to mid-Roman reign, before Chelsea's transfer ban under Frank Lampard, the club failed to give young players adequate first-team opportunities. That problem hasn't yet gone away, but it has certainly improved, and should continue to do so, given the proven quality of Chelsea's academy players. So that is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, of course, it goes without saying, for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.